Yo, what's up guys? Today I'm going to be talking about 17 tips that can improve your game in 2025. And this could be either a beginner tip, but it could also be more of a late game tip because I do know some of my guildies actually didn't do this. There's actually a few things that I didn't do that I might consider doing after this as well. Spoke with a bunch of friends and guildies to get this list working. So I hope you enjoyed that. And if you do, like this video, subscribe to the channel. But let's get into the tips. First of all, use scrolls to get energy. And how does that work? And it's mainly unknown scrolls. Do keep in mind, this method does cost mana, but if you get your scrolls, let's say you go for your unknown scrolls, you summon a bunch of them, you do know you get a lot of fodder material. With that fodder material, you can actually do the following. The following is that you could create any unit and just make that a 6-star. So how do we do that? Well, we just use any of those material and we make a 6-star out of it. How does that give you any energy? Well, it's by the following step. If you go from a 5-star to a 6-star, you will always gain 200 energy right there. So therefore you can translate 600 stars into 200 energy, and therefore you can trade your unknown scrolls towards energy. But that also does count for any of those other rainbow mons and other kind of stuff. You can create those into energy, and that just helps you out a bunch to just get like a little bit more energy, and especially those, it translates into good energy, so might as well use it. Also for events, sometimes there is a trade for energy or there's a trade for an unknown scroll. It depends on the event, but sometimes the trade for unknown scrolls is better than the trade for energy. Tip number 2, get hero fight runes from events. And I often get the question on my videos or the comment on my videos like, yeah, no one has those kind of fight runes, no one wants to farm fight. That is true. You shouldn't be farming fight because fight is bad. It's a really horrible dungeon to farm in the first place. But I do have a fair amount of fight runes. And where do all of my fight runes come from? Well, I would say 90% are just from heroes from events. So if you check these things, like sure, I have a bunch of legendaries, but a lot of that are just heroes. And where do most of those heroes come from? It's just the moment that you have an event. During that event, you can choose to get hero runes in a certain type. Always go for fight runes. And the reason is, if you were to select those on violent, because in the end, most event resources should go to violent. But if you go for a hero one, hero doesn't really need, or you don't really need heroes in violent. Like, as you can see, everything is freaking legendary at some point, right? Sure, some heroes might be good, but most of the heroes are going to be sold. Whereas a crappy fight rune is still usable. Like something like this, as a violent rune, 100% sold, like 1000% sold. But as a fight rune, it's like, yeah, this could be used, this could be used, this could be used. You don't need crazy good fight runes. You just need decent fight runes. And most of those decent fight runes come from the heroes in the events. However, if you do get legendaries, you still go violent, of course. Tip number 3, use less units in RTA. And that's mainly in the ranks of Conqueror, Fighter, but even Punisher rank. If you're using 50 units or more than 50 units, you're probably making A, the draft way too difficult, B, spreading out your runes way too much, and C, it's just at some point you don't know what to play, right? Whereas you should just be focusing on a set amount of monsters. I would say Conqueror maybe like 15 to 20, Punisher maybe you go like 20 to 30-ish, and Fighter maybe just even 15. Those are not necessarily hard numbers. It kind of depends on what units you have and what monsters you have and what kind of things you can work with. But I do see a lot of people trying to be like, oh, I'm a Conqueror rank, but I have my Chandra team ruined, and I have like an Oliver version ruined, and I have like Twin Angels ruined, and I have like a Moor ruined, and I have a Sierra ruined. It's like, you're not going to be drafting all of that. And you're spreading out the runes way too much, and you have no clue what to draft at some point. That's also the thing. If you have 5 counters against one thing, you're going to be overthinking like, oh, I could pick each of those 5 ones. Sure, if you're in Guardian level, you kind of know which one to pick, and you can maybe get away with it. But I actually saw a stream the other day, and it was a top 20 player, and he only had 34 units in his favorite box. So it does kind of show that you don't need 50 units in your RTA box. It's sometimes better to have something selected that's very good runed than something that is the very best counter. So for that reason, maybe start looking at like tuning down, because nowadays people have a lot of units. And therefore you think like, oh, I see people use Oliver, and I see people use Chandra, and I see people use Sierras, and this and that, blah, blah, blah. And at some point you're like, yeah, I have like speed contesting units, Sonya, Sekhmet, Athena, Zibal, and 3 other units ruined like that. It's like, I can't make 3 units on super high speed. Like 3, maybe okay. 4, 5, that's where I draw the line, where like some of them are gonna get like a lot drop down in speed. And for that reason, I would say in general, use less units in RTA. Tip number 4. Rather create a safe team than a fast team. And what does that mean? Well, for example, I am 100% sure this team runs about like 20 to 23 seconds because this Tesher is kind of buffed. However, I could make a faster team if I go for a Julie Mephisto. But that is less safe because the Julie Mephisto makes the Mephisto have the Homunculus passive not really work that well because the revive doesn't work with the Mephisto on the field. And for that reason, it is not as good and not as safe. Whereas this team, it feels once in like 1,000 or something. In the end, if you don't have an infinite amount of crystals, which I think most of us do have a finite amount of crystals, it is better to not have crystals wasted on a failed run. It's just a simple fact. And sure, if you're like 5 to 10 seconds slower, doesn't really matter that much because every time that you fail, mostly a failed run takes like where you normally run like 20 seconds. If a run goes all the way to failing, it probably takes you 40 or 50 seconds. So that's a double run wasted of time as well. So it's not even improving time by that much if it's failing. And you have the big issue, you're just straight up wasting energy. So rather make a safe team than a super fast team. And that counts for all dungeons. Sure, if you're going for like a super safe team and it's 1 minute compared to your 20 seconds normal, then you could maybe make the trade-off, but you get the idea. Number 5, use free TOA. And this is actually a tip that came from one of my guildies and I've never done myself in the first place. But that is to do TOA when it's free, rather to do it whenever it just opened up. Might you ask, what is the reason for that? Well, free TOA does give you the cost of all of the floors for free. How much is that in total? That is 500 per TOA normal and 500 per TOA hard. You do therefore have to clear it within pretty much the time frame of 3 hours, I would say, because you have like 4 times an hour window where you have the free TOA in, which is recurring every month. However, one is then on the Sunday, which is during the arena rush, which I would also recommend people to do, so therefore you kind of got 3 hours. But most of my guildies say like it's relatively easy for an endgame account to clear that all in that kind of time. If you're more of a beginner game account, make just sure that you're doing like the first like half of TOA hard and at least all of TOA normal, because it's pretty relatively easy to do. How much does that save you? Once again, it is 500 energy per normal, 500 energy per hard, and it counts down to in total 300 crystals if you do both that way. So it does help you out for 300 crystals a month. Is that an insane amount? Not really, but all the little bits help. Then number 6, create a auto team for normal arena. But first of all, do rivals. That is very important. As now I just logged in, I just woke up pretty much, so I haven't done my rivals yet. But always do your rivals, whatever you want to do them, how you want to do them, doesn't really matter. You probably have some kind of unit that just one-shots, like a Zyros is good, Leia is good, like Poseidon is good, anything can kind of one-shot it. But do your rivals. In the end, it does kind of add up the amount of crystals you get from it. Sure, it's not an insane amount, but throughout the whole month of doing your rivals, you still can get a good amount. Then, back to the first part, create an auto team for arena. I do know a lot of people are stacking their maximum amount of wings at a lot of time. You never really want to be stacking out the maximum amount of wings unless you just didn't log in for a while. What does an auto team look like? An auto team is where if the enemy doesn't have any hard damage dealers, you can clear that on auto. Sure, it's like people already gonna go, it's like, yeah, but you have to say May LD5, that kind of shit. I always get that. Easiest replacements, and I would say that this is by far the best auto team out there. Veramos, Leo, Feng Yang, and an Alaya. That team is absolutely insane. You can also do this with a, Tetra, but I think in general the Veramos is better. Even this, you would still be able to clear that. Might you say you don't have a Feng Yang, then an option would still be to go for anything that is a high damage dealer from being tanky. So a Sahat is actually a really good call to go for that. Don't you have an Alaya, then you definitely could go for a Riley. That is still options out there. Were you to say I don't have a Leo? Leo is definitely one of those that makes it a lot able to go for auto teams. But there are few other options out there as well. So a few other options for damage dealers which don't really care about elements and stuff. Dominic's pretty good. Riley's pretty good as support. Varamos is good as mentioned. But if you don't have any Leo, you could, for example, also go for something weird. Like let's say we go for Douglas. And we start adding in a few units that would give him the chance to get his passive up more often. So we go for this, we go for that, we go for this, and we go for another support. Keep in mind that your damage dealer should be on Destroy, which in my case, of course, isn't, and it's not properly runed for this. But the Feng Yang, of course, it is Destroy, and that is the chill thing. During your farming, you can just tap something on, not look at your phone for 3 minutes. And as mentioned, there's a lot of teams that you can auto, like this, super auto food. This one, wouldn't recommend to auto this because this is just straight up too much damage. And sure, you can make like a fast cleave to kind of clear it, but this super auto food, there's no damage to that whatsoever. This one might be a little bit more tricky because of this thing, but thinking about this, Zera to another auto unit that you might think of that you haven't used much is something like a Kinky. If you make like a whole team 100 dress with a Kinky, that's definitely an autoable unit as well. And these kind of teams, there's just a lot of teams that do definitely auto. Like even this, you could definitely auto it. It takes a little while on this, but you can auto a lot of teams during the midweek. Like so far, I've only seen one team that I wouldn't auto, and this one is maybe a little bit too many healers for my liking, so it would take too long. But the only non-autoable team is this over here. So yeah, make an auto team because in the end, you do get a decent amount of scrolls. Those scrolls will translate into net 5s. Those net 5s will translate into dupes. Those dupes will translate into LD scrolls. You know how it works, so. Tip number 7 is buy the engraved conversion stone for normal. I actually didn't do those on mine. I tend to forget sometimes as well, but this is definitely something that is more forgotten because the re-ups, sure, you're probably going to be buying those. Like if you forget those, then well, that's useful. But since this one is all the way at the bottom, people tend to forget this. And you just want to do the one on 3 stars. I wouldn't recommend to do the one on 4 stars, so just the one on 3 stars. And what I mostly do is you just go over here and I just start selecting a bunch of mainly attack and support types of whatever element. I don't even really look at what I get, but they're going to be useful at some point if you just throw them in. It's just very useful to do this, and it will save you, or it just improves your artifacts by a decent margin. So definitely do get those. Also, besides just getting those, do keep in mind that you want to get the re-apps. You do want to get the crafts over here if you do summon enough, but only if you do summon enough. I would recommend to do the LD first and then these after. And also the legendary magic box. This one is pretty recommended to get as well because these materials you're probably overstacking anyway, so you might as well just do this. The rewards aren't super great on it, but it's kind of okay. I wouldn't really recommend to go for this one. That is the infinite craft because this one has really shitty rewards. Like sure, it doesn't cost that much, but you're not gonna get happy of these kind of things. Tip number 8, which might sound really stupid, and it's just do your dailies. You might often be at the position where you're 80 out of 100, and then you're like, okay, which one should I do? Well, the best one to do is actually fight the Dark Thing or the Elemental of the Rift Beast, because in the end you need to farm all of the Rift Beasts a little bit. So this one is the Rift Beast that is right over here. But you have a cashback of getting 50 energy back. So technically it costs you 30 energy to do that thing, and it's just really nice to do because in the end you have to farm it a little bit regardless anyways. I wouldn't do a full run of 30, I'll always do select it on a run of 10, but I would always recommend to do this because it's just a cheap thing to farm because you get like a lot of cash back from the energy itself. How you farm it doesn't really matter as long as you just get the 3.5 million, not wasting any energy regardless on that. But that's definitely a nice one to do. Tip number 9 is don't go too strong on your cell exclusion. And if you're not familiar with it yet, where do you find your cell exclusion? If you click on this mana box thingy, sack thingy, you do have the cell exclusion over here and you have all of the settings in here. A lot of people often ask like, oh, can you share mine? Mine is actually in the recommended tab over here with saying that I'm a banana. Would I necessarily recommend mine to be used? I think mine is good for me, but you might definitely want to check in, for example, Dookie's one or the one from Niu if you're in Europe server. I think in global server, the one from Frank is pretty decent, and the other ones, other servers, I don't really remember. But just go through what the other people have and just see like what does it make a little bit of sense, because most of them, they do make a decent amount of sense. If you're more of a beginner player, maybe start looking for one that has also mentioned like, okay, more for noob / mid-game players or something like that. Or just go in here and just give everything a -1 and then just go from there. Because I do notice that especially if you go for one that is too strong and you don't -1 a few of those stats, you're going to be selling way too many runes that could actually be good for you. So in that case, to be honest, it is best to keep nearly everything that is hero at the start. But again, a lot of people do like to get their life a little bit easier, not have to roll that many things. But if you're one of those people saying like, I never get anything good, and it might be that your cell exclusion is set up too harsh, or you don't really see the quality in a rune. Like, let's say that a rune just rolls a 12 speed based with an 18 crit rate next to it. That is still a good rune for a lot of people. So definitely do keep those in mind. Then number 10 is mark your runes. So for the current state that I have bananas of purple. That's just pretty much runes are done. Rehab 1 and Rehab 2, that's just the priority of rehabs. Then we have to grind, to enchant. Priority of grinds and enchants, that's mainly for legendaries. And then I still have 2 left. I don't necessarily say that this is the way to do it, but this is at least my way to do it. So I would recommend at least everyone have a tab for rehabs. To be honest, Rehab 1 and Rehab 2, I just always use both of them at the same time, so it doesn't really matter too much anymore. It is good to have something that would make it like, okay, my rune is done, and I just changed this to bananas purple because you can just write whatever you want in there, and that's how I showed that you can write everything in there. But it's also good to have one in there for like grinds and gems. I feel like they can kind of be under the same tab. But the priority on those is really good as well, because there, especially since R5 is not that great right now, you're going to be a lot of them that you're going to be just wanting to do heroes on, but there's a few that you want to do legendaries on. So therefore, having a priority on grinds and gems in a tab over here is very useful. So those are my recommendations. Maybe you have some more, leave them in the comments if you do. Then number 11 is improve your world boss. I did already do world boss for my case. But you want to be aiming to get at least triple S on all of the 3 times. Because world boss in the end, if you fix your world boss right now to always give triple S for as long as you play, you will get all of those triple S's all the time. And it's relatively easy to do. So what are the main things that you want to be focusing on? Water units. Any water unit that is devil mode will give you a better score. Good artifacts, and that is just the highest artifact score will give you a better score in there. It's just as simple as that. So if you get a good artifact on water or any of the types that is connected to a water unit or a unit you don't use anymore, especially water units that you already have Delvamon that you now put in storage, start giving runes to those, because that's where you see a lot of improvement for your world boss. And just equip whatever runes that you're not using as well. You want to be aiming for the runes that are upping the best base stat of that unit. So what does that mean? For example, if you go for, I actually have a decent amount of water units runed up just specific for world boss. I do also happen to sometimes de-equip a few runes from it because I start using those runes, so that's definitely a thing. But this is definitely one of those world boss units, just whatever stats, as much stats as possible. Let's see for a better example of like, okay, this one has high base defense, high base HP, so I focus on those. Crit damage is fine. The only thing that doesn't really work for world boss is high speed, and then as mentioned, artifacts with high quality as well. And right now you can select them by the score, so that just makes it a lot easier to just equip whatever artifact quality there is. If you do want to go for any other elements, light and dark still does fine. I think wind is fine and fire is the worst, so you have to keep that order in mind. And water is by far the best. So but just aim for triple S's. And triple S's nowadays, I wouldn't say it's that difficult, because back in the days, we could get triple S's without artifacts. With artifacts, it made it a lot easier. Then tip number 12 is save your mystical scrolls for 10+1. Every time a new unit is released is where we get a 10+1. And this is more for endgame accounts that do already have most of the units. But still, even without, I can recommend most people to go for 10+1s. We have seen it in last year, in 2024. They are releasing a lot more units, which does also mean that they're giving more of the 10+1 event. Because every time, so far in the last, I think, 20 units that they released, every time they release a new unit, they always go for the 10+1. And this simply, saving this just nets you 10% extra mystical scrolls. So in here, with the 2,000 mystical scrolls that I have right now, I would have 2.2k mystical scrolls. Well, even you trade that back, so it's like 2. But it just helps, it legit gives me the average of 1 extra net 5 for every 10 net 5s. It's just simple as that. And for any of the other scrolls, you don't necessarily have to save. Only the mystical scrolls work, so the elemental scrolls, all of those, they don't work for that. But just the mystical scrolls, you can consider saving for the 10+1. Tip number 13, if you're free to play, but also if you're pay to win, do all of the content that does give you extra crystals. So where can you get extra crystals? Well, it's a whole bunch of places. You get extra crystals from doing Arena Rush. You get extra crystals from doing Siege. You get extra crystals from doing World Boss. You just get extra crystals for doing the Subjugation and the Slime Boss. There's just so many places where you can get extra crystals, and I would recommend to do all of them. And that's also the point where people are like, I don't really like Siege, and I don't want to be in a guild in Siege, and it's too much effort. Just try to find like a lower ranked Siege guild that you can just chill, do all of your hits the moment Siege starts or whatever, and that they're totally fine with that. It is still a lot better than not doing Siege at all. And you might actually at some point enjoy Siege at some point, like you might actually enjoy playing the game if you haven't done Siege in like ages. So yeah, you do get a good amount of crystals to actually play a lot of these content in the game. And if you want to maximize stuff, definitely a tip right there. Talking about doing all content, the Terrace Labyrinth actually does give a lot of good materials for grinds and gems. To be honest, since R5 has been this bad, mainly I have been getting all of my legendary grinds either through this or the dupe shop. Those are my best places to get legendary grinds nowadays. And this thing, especially if it's closed already, try to do all of your 5 lanterns all the time that you can do it. It's really, really good. And you're going to be finding out at some point, it's like, wow, this thing actually does drop a decent amount of legendaries. And also for earlier game players, still do it because it's definitely worth it. Also, for earlier game players, do buy all of the buildings that give you extra resources. Because sure, you're going to be buying the Crystal Titan, and well, Crystal Titan is the only one that's in here right now. That one you will find, but there's a few that actually go through crafting. And the ones through crafting you might actually miss out on because you didn't really notice that it was there. So what are the ones that are interesting to buy? Well, first of all, the energy extractor. This is definitely one that I missed out on a bit when I started a new account. It's like, wait, where is this thing? Oh, it's over here. So that's definitely one you want to buy. Then the other ones that you have, like you can get a little bit of max energy storage. In the end, max energy storage doesn't mean anything rather than you being able to be offline for a longer time without maxing out your energy. And that is also the reason that some people ask me, why do I not have these two for Dimensional Hole? For Dimensional Hole, these two, I don't have an infinite amount of Ancient Magic Origins. And you do get them for making more 2As, but I personally don't make more 2As. I just farm Elunia, but that is just a choice on that. However, this doesn't really add anything to me. What does actually add anything to me is the recharge rate. The recharge rate, you definitely do want to buy. So those are these two towers over here. And then you also have, of course, the Crystal Dragon. You do want to get that one as well because it's just a crystal cashback at some point as well. So do keep in mind that in buildings, there are a few buildings that you do want to buy just to get extra resources. Number 16 is equip your runes to make more space. As you can see over here, I have 5.3k runes. Might you think like, oh, then you also maxed out the amount of runes that you can actually get in total? Well, no, I did up it once. I am on 1.6 that I can have in total. But the total amount that I can do is just the 1.6. But I have that many more runes because I equipped a lot of units. And you could go for a lot of different styles. I have a lot of those 4 stars that I do tend to try to keep runes equipped on. But I also had, like, from way back in the days, like a whole bunch of 1 stars that I was equipping runes to. And with that, using your storage to get extra storage for your runes might help you out a bit. Do keep in mind that you can just throw everything in the storage and then not want to look at it. At some point, you kind of have to clean up your mess as well because your account does improve, you get better rune quality, runes are easier to drop, and at some point you have to go back and see, like, okay, a lot of those runes that I equipped back in the days, something like this, it's most likely never, like especially this one, it's most likely never going to be used again, and I might as well actually sell it. But then again, back in that day, oh wait, you don't even see the runes, ha ha ha, I'm just clicking through a few runes. But you get the idea, at some point you might actually want to be selling a few of those because they're not as good anymore as that you have the idea of like, okay, back in the days I didn't really know if I want to use them, might as well throw them in the storage. But now you're like, yep, I definitely have better rune quality than that, I'm not going to be using those. And of course, the same thing goes for artifacts. Every unit that can equip an artifact, just give it 2 artifacts to just give you a lot more artifact space. And then the final tip of today, use your grinds. I see a lot of people with a lot of grinds in their storage being like, I can't really farm R5 because I have too much storage and too much space and blah, blah, blah. Anything you don't use is not an upgrade. Any upgrade you use is, or don't use, is not an upgrade. And sure, there's also going to be a lot of people that are going to be stacking, like, I don't know how many of a specific type. Maybe you should start selling a bunch. But I also can recommend to just simply use everything. For example, for Blade, when I was doing a lot of R5 back in the days, I would just use every hero Blade speed that I could find until there's legitimately no spots left to find it to use it on. For example, for Vampire, okay, I've been farming a little bit of Necro as of lately. I haven't been farming any Dragons. Okay, not that much. This is where you can see that I only have a few spots. If I go back to doing a lot of R5 and I need my space, I will just use all of those speed grinds on all of those runes until there's 0 results left. And when there's 0 results left, then I start selling the heroes. But heroes, you can just freely use anything, anywhere. Maybe you want to be a little bit more specific on your Vayu, Swift, Will, and Despair, because those are more interesting. But especially on all of those others, just use your stuff. Same thing with, I see a bunch of people stacking like, oh, I have like, let's say that this is violent. I have like 7 of those, but I don't get the perfect rune. Well, maybe you're not going to get the perfect rune ever. Just use the fucking shit on things that you are using right now. If you have your, let's say you're using a lot of your Marsha, just throw this thing at some of the Marsha runes. Let's say you're using a lot of, I don't know what, Oliver. Throw these things at the Oliver runes that you're currently using. Even if they're not the best runes out there. If you're using the runes right now, they're gonna give you more wins if you just max grind them out. It's as simple as that. So maybe you want to keep like 1 or 2, but the moment you start overstacking more than that, just use the things. Because everything that's not used is never an upgrade. So those have been the 17 tips. If some of them were useful to you, let me know that in the comments. Also, if you have more tips than this, there's probably definitely more tips out there. Let me know in the comments as well, and I will pinpoint the one that I think is the best tip that I missed in my list. Guys, thanks a lot for watching, and hope to see you in the next one. Also, if this video was not that useful for you, but you might know a friend that recently started a game or was missing out on a few of those tips, share the video to him or her. Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more guides, join the Discord and check out the content tab for the guide video archive, which contains all of the guides that you might need. Hope to see you there.